Take a quick second and just look around at the modern reality you're living in right now. I mean, the device you're watching this on, the laws governing your city, the way you work, even the very language you're listening to right now, none of it happened by accident. Every single piece of our modern lives sits on top of this massive foundation, built block by block over thousands of years. Welcome to this explainer. We're going to take a structural journey through 10 of those foundational building blocks of our world. We'll be pulling directly from a really fascinating historical analysis to see exactly how these pivotal moments completely changed the way humans lived, fought, traded, governed, and communicated.
Okay, let's dive into this. To make 5,000 years of history actually digestible, we've broken the whole thing down into 5 eras. We've got foundations of civilization, the global spark, the age of revolutions, forging the modern era, and finally, building our world. Starting off with era number 1, foundations of civilization. So, to anchor ourselves firmly in the ancient world, we're looking at 3 massive pivot points. We start way back, around 3200 BCE, with the invention of writing. Then we make a jump to 27 BCE for the rise of the Roman Empire, and finally, 476 CE for its dramatic fall. Let's look at that first milestone, ancient Mesopotamia, right around 3200 BCE. Before this exact moment, human knowledge was incredibly fragile. Basically, it was passed down almost entirely through memory. If the folks who remembered the laws or the traditions passed away, that knowledge could literally vanish forever. The invention of writing changed the whole game. Imagine trying to run a global economy based purely on a giant game of telephone. No way, right? Writing allowed humanity to finally preserve records for trade, for taxes, for history, for generations. It meant that really, for the very first time, human progress became cumulative. Every new generation could build directly on the exact preserved knowledge of the last.
And this sets up our next 2 ancient milestones perfectly, the rise and fall of the Western Roman Empire. Starting around 27 BCE, Rome blew up from a regional Mediterranean power into an ancient superpower. They brought with them massive unifying systems, standardized law, mind-blowing engineering, a huge network of roads, and a shared government. But when the Western Empire finally collapsed in 476 CE, that massive unified system just shattered. Political power instantly fragmented. Completely new kingdoms emerged in the vacuum, and Europe entered a completely different era, what we now call the Middle Ages.
Moving on to our second era, the global spark.
We are now making a massive time jump out of the Middle Ages and right into the 15th century. In historical terms, this is where the pace of human connection suddenly hits the accelerator hard. I want to connect a really important dot for you here. Back in step 1, around 3200 BCE, humanity invents writing. But for thousands of years, if you wanted a copy of those records, someone had to write it out by hand. It was painfully slow and extremely expensive. Then, step 2 hits in the 15th century. Johannes Gutenberg rolls out the movable type printing press. And this didn't just change how books were made, it fundamentally altered human capability. The ability to reproduce written information just exploded. Suddenly, knowledge was accessible to a vastly wider audience. It acted as a massive catalyst that accelerated education, religious reform, and widespread scientific discussion. And just as ideas began traveling faster, so did people. Spanning the 15th to the 17th centuries, European voyages kicked off the age of exploration, connecting completely separated parts of the globe on an unprecedented scale. Now, as the source material outlines, this era had some really complex dualities. On one hand, it sparked this massive global exchange. We're talking brand new trade networks and a huge exchange of plants, animals, and technologies. But on the other hand, the global consequences were devastating. This era brought about conquest, widespread colonization, deadly diseases, and the brutal expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. The world was finally connected, for sure, but at a tremendous and often tragic cost. Let's move to and see how this builds into our third era, the Age of Revolutions. This era brings some intense societal upheaval, which creates a super dense timeline. In fact, the dates in this era are incredibly tightly packed compared to our earlier ancient milestones. From 1775 straight through the 19th century, human society experiences a relentless wave of rapid transformations. The first major shockwave hits in North America. Between 1775 and 1783, 13 British colonies fought for and eventually achieved their independence. But the impact of the American Revolution went way beyond simply creating a new nation. It served as a really powerful global catalyst.
The success of this revolution aggressively spread foundational modern political ideas. It proved to the world that a republican government was actually possible. It heavily promoted the strict necessity of political representation, and it majorly advanced the whole concept of individual rights on the world stage. Now, what's really interesting about this is how just a few years later, right across the Atlantic, the French Revolution challenged the traditional political and social order of Europe in a vastly different way. The source text breaks this down into two distinct historical realities. First, you have the revolution championing incredibly progressive new ideals, pushing hard for citizenship, strict equality before the law, and popular sovereignty. However, the harsh reality of overturning those deeply entrenched systems meant that these ideals came hand in hand with a decade of extreme violence and intense political upheaval. While political structures were literally burning down and being rebuilt, the very way human beings worked and lived was fundamentally mutating. Enter the Industrial Revolution. And this wasn't just a change, it was a total societal acceleration. Factories rose up, steam power roared, railways carved straight through the landscape. New manufacturing methods dramatically multiplied production, and economies shifted practically overnight. Entirely new modern cities sprouted up out of nowhere just to house the massive influx of workers. The daily life of an average person was completely rewritten in a matter of decades. That brings us to Era 4, forging the modern era. We are zeroing in on a terrifyingly tight 6-year window here, from the beginning of World War II in 1939 to its conclusion in 1945. It is honestly staggering to realize how quickly this very short period of time forced an entirely new paradigm upon the globe. The impacts of World War II, as detailed in our source, are almost impossible to overstate. This was a massive global conflict that dragged in dozens of countries. It resulted in a scale of destruction and a sheer loss of life previously unimaginable, right alongside the absolute horror of the Holocaust. It also saw a terrifying threshold crossed with the very first use of nuclear weapons. But out of this immense destruction, a new international order had to be built. It led directly to the establishment of the United Nations to try and prevent such a war from ever happening again, while simultaneously setting the stage for the United States and the Soviet Union to emerge as the two deeply rivalrous superpowers that would define the next half-century. And finally, era number 5, building our world. It is incredible to think that we go from a shattered, recovering post-war world in 1945 directly to humanity taking its very first steps on an entirely different celestial body just 24 years later. So the crucial point here is that when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the lunar surface on July 20th, 1969, during NASA's Apollo 11 mission, it wasn't just a victory in the space race. It represented something so much deeper for our history. It was the absolute, undeniable proof of what human science, precision engineering, and, most importantly, massive human cooperation could actually achieve. It basically took all the knowledge, the industrial capability, and the sheer societal organization built over the previous 5,000 years and focused it into a single point of unimaginable triumph. These 10 events we've mapped out today, they're separated by thousands of years and millions of miles. But each one permanently changed the course of everything that followed. From the first scribe pressing a stylus into clay in Mesopotamia, to Gutenberg pressing ink to paper. From the smoke of early factories to the rockets firing into space, these are the pillars of the exact reality you are sitting in right now. As our source so perfectly states, history is not just a record of the past, it is the story of how the modern world was built. Every single day, new discoveries are being made. New political shifts are happening, and new technologies are being engineered. The foundation is still being built, block by block. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as you log off today. Based on the trajectory of everything we've just looked at, what event is happening right now that will be added to this list in the future? What is the next event that will completely change our world? Keep your eyes open, stay intensely curious, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.